welcome back to the Pursuit Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about entrepreneurship, startups, and sort of what it's like to be doing your own thing. I'm joined today by
Safia. I am the solo technical founder of Zarf, which is an online subscription content marketplace for written content.
How fantastic. So what's it like? How long have you been doing this? I've got way too many questions.
I started doing this in mid-June. I got a small bit of funding through a grant that was provided by the Shuttleworth Foundation. And that kind of gave me the kick in the butt that I needed to get started with this idea, because it's something I've been tossing around in my head for a while, but I never really had the motivation to get it going. But once I had somebody who was willing to invest some kind of financial resource in it, I was like, all right, it's time to get serious. So I started developing the product in June. I'm the solo technical founder, so I wrote the code, I do all the marketing and the sales and all the fun stuff. And I've been going at it ever since.
That sounds like a lot of work.
It is. It gives me a lot of appreciation for just how much it takes to successfully execute on software. I think we use so many products in our day-to-day lives, and the fact that I'm building one now has given me this unique perspective into all of the work it takes to deliver Twitter to you, to deliver YouTube to you, to deliver Facebook to you. It's not an easy task, but it's super refreshing and fun.
So a lot of people talk about having to be on 24/7 in entrepreneurship. Just sort of a ballpark, how much time a week do you imagine you're working on this?
This is where I get in trouble with some people, because I definitely do spend a lot of time working on it. I would say at the upper end, I'm doing 80 hours a week. And then on the lower end, it's like a 50 to 60 hours a week.
That sounds really intense.
It is really intense. And, there's a lot of conversations that go on about how much time people put into things and what amount of work it takes to get something accomplished. And I think ultimately it's up to the individual to figure out their own pace and what their work style is like. I know I'm the kind of person who I can do 80 hours one week, and then I might need to take a break for 3 days and then do 50 hours another week or 20 hours another week. And I think the most important thing about being an entrepreneur when it comes to kind of physical and mental health is just listening to your body and kind of not fighting it. There are times when you might want to stay up another hour to get something done. And I'm very cautious about, not staying up or maybe taking a quick nap and just being aware of what my body needs. And if you work with your body, it'll work with you, is my general experience with things. And kind of just using this process as a way to learn my pace and to test my limits and to see what kinds of conditions I can work under, what kinds of things stress me out, what kind of things don't. And just using it to grow from a physical and mental perspective, if that makes any sense.
That makes a lot of sense. So we're doing a lot of hours. Where are the rewards? What feels really good?
To be honest, it's the really simple stuff. When I'm working on developing a new feature, it's when I push it out and it goes through staging, I test it out in staging, and it goes into production. And somebody sees it and it's like, oh, that's neat. When it comes to doing sales, it's when I'm sitting doing a demo with a potential customer and they're like, oh, wow, this is a really good idea. And they might not, follow through and sign on as a customer, but the fact that it inspired them or it triggered a positive emotion or a positive response is really rewarding. And sometimes it's just people reaching out. I've been tweeting a lot about the process of building the company. And just kind of being very honest and open about what it's like to do this solo and kind of self-funded and bootstrapped. And just kind of hearing the fact that people are inspired by this and are using it as a motivation to go out and pursue their own ideas and their own creative visions is fulfilling. So those are the 3 dimensions to where those hours really satisfy me.
So sort of the validation of getting a feature shipped, getting a piece of code written that's ready to go and ready to be added to the product, or sort of some external feedback that you are on the right track and that this is a great idea.
Yeah, it's when kind of I get confirmation that this thing that's been in my head for so long and that was just an idea when it's realized in the physical world is appealing to somebody in some way is really fulfilling.
So for our dear listener who might be sort of sitting on their idea, they've wanted to do a startup for a while, can you walk through a little bit of how those rather long hours you're putting in, how they're distributed? Are you mostly working on features and sort of heads down on the technical part? How much is marketing? How much is sales?
Okay, sure. So the first thing to know is that I am a solo founder and I'm bootstrapped. So the amount of work that I have to do is a little bit more than what somebody who has received funding from a venture capital company or an angel investor might have. It's a little different from the kind of work that somebody who has a co-founder or a small team that they're starting up with would have. So essentially, most of the time that I am working, the product's been out in beta for about 11 days now.
Oh, congratulations.
Yes, it's very fresh. It's been out in beta for about 11 days. Most of the time I spent communicating with users and reaching out to folks, whether it's via cold emails or kind of through my network to see if they would be interested in being users of the product. You know, I'll reach out to a writer that I really admire and say, hey, I built this thing that'll help you earn money for your work in a sustainable fashion. Would you like to try it out? I'd be happy to give you a demo. I do a lot of consulting with potential writers, not official consulting, but I'll kind of help them figure out how a product like Zarf might fit into their future as a writer and kind of their growth trajectory as a writer. So I'd say maybe about 1/4 of the time is just kind of interacting with other individuals, external users, figuring out how I can best serve them and make my product better. Then I would say there's another 1/4 that is just kind of figuring out what the future of the product would look like. So what new features I want to add, what kind of business decisions I want to make, updating the wording on a lot of things. One thing I've realized is no matter what product you're building, it all comes down to how you phrase it, how you describe it, how you market it to people. So a lot of this has been just kind of figuring out the best way to describe what my product is. So I'd say another 1/4 is just like vision and strategy and brand type stuff. I would say that now that it's in beta, technical work probably takes more than 1/4 of the time because part of the beta is fixing bugs, figuring out any problems and kind of weird user experience issues. So maybe 1/4-ish for technical stuff. And then the rest of it is just kind of keeping tabs on how users on the platform are doing, collecting stats, seeing who's visiting the app when, figuring out what kind of tweaks I can make to it based on what users are doing on the app and how I can make it better. And also driving data by using the app myself. So I am dogfooding the product a little bit. I'm publishing a monthly publication on Zarf called Notes from the Maker. And it's a paid publication where I kind of go behind the scenes with folks about what it's like to build Zarf as a solo technical founder. And in the process of using my product as the creator, I also identify ways that I can fix it and use those as data points.
And it seems like a fantastic way to encourage continued empathy with the user.
Yeah. I was tweeting about this yesterday, actually. I have a publication or a post that I'm supposed to issue out on Tuesday. And I'm like trying to write my post on Zarf, but every time I type, I like notice a bug or notice a user experience just doesn't right. And I'm like, okay, I have to go fix this because it's going to annoy me. And then I'll go fix it. And it goes on. And I realize I've like written a lot of code, but not actually written the post that I needed to publish. But I think that's kind of the best part about being a solo technical founder. You have ownership over the project. And if you see something wrong or something that bugs you, you can go in the code base, fix it, write a test, push it to staging, test it out, and push it to production and then use it. And that empowerment is honestly the best part of this process. I'm the kind of person who gets very frustrated when I can't make something as I envision it or change something to the way that I wish it would be in my head. And that's kind of, I think, where I get my affinity as somebody who's a maker of things. It's just being able to fix something when I see it's not the way I would like it to be, or if I think it could be better, is super fulfilling.
People often say that the hardest things remaining in technology are hiring and naming things.
Yeah.
And being a sole technical founder, you don't have to do any hiring quite yet.
Yes.
But Zarf is fantastically named. How did you come up with this?
Yeah, I will dive a little bit into the naming of Zarf for those who might not be aware of it. So Zarf is Arabic for envelope. And the reason I picked this name is because I really want Zarf to be a platform that is not opinionated or prescriptive in the way that content is delivered to readers, and the way that writers produce content. Zarf is truly the middleman in the author or writer and reader relationship. And I realized that envelopes are a lot like middlemen in the writer to receiver relationship of letters. An envelope doesn't prescribe what kind of content you can write in the letter within it. It doesn't prescribe where that content has to be delivered. You don't have to send it to a particular address. It could go anywhere. It truly is the middleman. And I picked that name. Arabic is my first language. I moved to the US when I was 7 years old, so I learned English as my second language. And I thought it'd also be a great way to kind of infuse my kind of heritage and background into the product by picking a name that reflected my identity a little bit. So Zarf was born.
It sounds like the story of how Zarf both got named and got developed is very personal. So it's your mother tongue. It's something you really care about with writing. You really, really want to make a platform that doesn't make demands on writers or inject a certain style or type of content. Mm-hmm. This sounds like it is a very personal project for you.
It is. And I think if you build anything, regardless of whether it's a B2B product or a B2C product, it should be something that you're emotionally invested in. I call Zarf my baby a lot, and sometimes that's kind of in jest. But in a lot of ways, it is serious. It's a manifestation of something that's in my mind. It encapsulates my creative approach, my technical approach, a lot of my opinions about how marketing and product development should be done that I've learned from different experiences that I've had in the technical industry. I think whenever you build a product, especially solo, you're really bringing yourself to it, because all of the decisions that are made with respect to that product are ultimately your decisions, and your identity, your life experience, your beliefs are going to play into how the product is produced and released. And sometimes that's really nerve-wracking, because a big part of product success is the decisions that are made, the execution. So the way that I implement Zarf, the idea, is completely different from how somebody else might implement the same idea. And those differences make the product appealing to different groups of people, help attract different markets. So it is really a personal endeavor, especially because I'm solo at the moment.
Being the sole technical founder and being a woman of color in the startup space, mm-hmm. has that been sort of difficult or challenging in any way?
Yeah, it has been. So Zarf is bootstrapped aside from the grant funding that I received at the beginning, which is nowhere near the volumes of financial support that other startups might earn at the start of their career. Zarf is bootstrapped, and I'm intending on it being bootstrapped. I don't intend to seek any external funding. And I picked that for a very intentional reason. I think that sort of the venture capital ecosystem has this really unhealthy power dynamic where people who are less represented in tech, in business, kind of have the short end of the stick and have to confront uncomfortable situations in order to get money from people who have more power than them, more resources than them, more leverage than them. And I really wanted to go solo because I wanted to avoid having to confront those unhealthy power dynamics. In venture capital, in some parts of the tech industry, I wanted this to be something that I had total ownership over. And I think it's hard just because I don't have so many of the connections. I do have valuable connections in the industry, but nowhere near the extent that other people might start off with if, they went to a school in or near Silicon Valley, if they had worked at multiple startups before, if they had that kind of network. I think if you go and look at the origin story of every kind of traditional Silicon Valley startup, you'll see that when they got started really early on, there was a network of investors and people who were funding them that largely consisted of rich white men who have been successful in the industry and kind of continue to perpetuate their success and power over it through these investments.
So that the folks who are underrepresented in tech are underrepresented in venture capital.
Yeah.
And it becomes sort of a self-perpetuating cycle where talented underrepresented people don't have access to either these positions of power or benefits from a close relationship with them.
Yeah. So these like unhealthy power structures are being perpetuated in newer generations of entrepreneurs and business owners in the tech industry. And I kind of wanted to step back and just build something my own and see how I could make it. And I'm not going to lie, this would be so much easier if I had gone a traditional route and went and raised funding and hired a team of people. It probably might have been a more popular or relevant product now. I would have had more features. But I think it goes back to that authenticity. I wouldn't have felt authentic in myself if I went out and raised funding for Zarf.
And I think that's a very brave approach to say, do you know what? I've been working in the tech industry. I see these unhealthy dynamics. And actually, I'm just going to do my own thing. Seems wonderfully brave.
Thank you. But yeah, I wanted to kind of just walk on the less beaten path. And if I'm successful, my hope is that I can contribute that success and help change those unhealthy power dynamics that exist in the industry. I think sometimes you do have to go out on your own and be a bit rebellious in order to change an existing power structure. Sometimes working within the power structure is a good way to make change, and sometimes kind of taking it by surprise from the back is another way to affect change.
Yeah. Sneak in, build something beautiful, become fantastic, and then, I don't know, maybe go out there and be a VC yourself.
Yeah. One thing that I told people, or I tell people a lot, is the company behind Zarf, the product that I'm building, is called Tanmu Labs. Tanmu is actually another Arabic origin word. It kind of means nurture or grow something.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Thank you. My vision is that in the future, I will have a company that has inclusive and equitable hiring practices, that produces ethical products, and show that it is possible to exist as a profitable venture in tech and to have a diverse staff, to have a product that does not violate the privacy of your customers or hurt them in any way, and to be able to sustain and push the industry forward with lots of interesting perspectives and creative visions into how products should be built. And that's like my ultimate dream, is that one day I'll have a little business all my own where I can show people that it is possible to be profitable, ethical, diverse, and inclusive in tech and be successful, and that you don't have to shortchange anybody or make unhealthy or harmful decisions that affect your employees or customers in adverse ways.
That is an absolutely beautiful vision. If you were talking to someone else who is just getting started with their idea, they said, maybe another woman of color who wants to be the sole technical founder. If you're talking to you from 2 years ago, what kinds of things do you wish you had known before you started?
It's okay to make mistakes. They're not the end of the world. I'm the kind of person, I'm very much so a perfectionist. I don't like not doing things right or when things don't land correctly. And I think one of the most important things that I've had to learn in the process of building Zarf is it's okay to make mistakes. No one is judging you as hard for your mistakes as you are yourself. So it's okay if you pushed a bug to production and it ruined something for the users. It's okay if the landing page doesn't look good the first time you release it. From recent experience, I've felt that. It's okay if there's typos somewhere because you're the only one reviewing your work most of the time. Just kind of giving yourself some slack and room to breathe has been very important. I think it goes back to kind of that mental health, personal growth aspect where a lot of this has just been not only testing my limits, but kind of forgiving myself for things and learning that it's okay. It's not the end of the world. There's plenty of time to fix things. No one has their eyes 24/7 on Zarf.co like I do. So I'm a bit more obsessed with the product than others. I think that's the most important lesson. It's just self-forgiveness and not fearing mistakes as long as you learn from them or fix them.
That is a fantastic lesson and completely unexpected. Before getting started with Zarf, what kind of background did you have?
That's a great question. So I think in a lot of ways I have an unconventional history in tech, and in other ways I have kind of a traditional or as to be expected history in tech. I wrote my first computer program when I was 13 years old, which is kind of the more kind of traditional or cliche aspect to my story. So I started programming at a very young age. I did it because I was obsessed with watching documentary films at the time.
Oh, how cool.
And one film that I watched, yes, was a series on the history of computing. So it talked about kind of Charles Babbage, Ada Lovelace, the ENIAC, all of the interesting things that were going on in computing in the 50s, 60s. And then it talked about Google and kind of how Google was built and how Page and Brin basically looked at the web in this completely unconventional way at the time, which is as a web of interconnected pages, not as singular entities that were isolated, and how they used that perception to completely change the way that search engines were built and built the multinational corporation that we know as Google. And when I watched the documentary at the time, I was like, I should build a search engine. Mind you, I had not written any code at that time. I had played with HTML and CSS on my Neopets profile. I was comfortable like changing settings on my computer, and I would say I was comfortable with using the machine in a more advanced sense, but I never actually ran any code. And I was like, I'm going to build a search engine because that seems like an easy thing to do. Turns out it's not.
Were you a pretty cool little kid?
I was. I did most of this summer. I started this the summer before I started high school.
Were you a pretty cool teenage kid?
I was a pretty cool teenage kid. In retrospect, at the time, I didn't feel like I was cool. In retrospect, I'm very happy that I made that decision. But I taught myself Python. I read a ton of books that I found online about search engines and how they're built and computers and all of this stuff. And I was self-taught. And I also took some classes at my high school related to computer science. And then I went on and pursued a degree in computer science. I'm actually still in college.
No way.
In my senior year at the moment. Yeah.
I love how you bury the lead on that, where you're like, oh, I'm working all these hours. I'm doing all this. By the way, I'm a university student.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm currently in my senior year at university getting a computer science degree. So I kind of took this thread that started when I was 13 and wanted to build a search engine. And now I have like a degree, or I'm working towards a degree, and I have a startup business that I'm running. And kind of throughout college, I did a ton of work in open source. I've done a few presentations at tech conferences. I've done a lot of writing, just kind of was really involved in the industry and enjoyed seeing people build things. I would say the most influential experience that I had was my experience in open source. I worked as a collaborator on several projects and a maintainer of several of my own. And running an open source project or helping run an open source project is honestly the best preparation for running a startup that exists ever. Because an open source project is essentially a business that unfortunately doesn't make any money. Or
doesn't often.
Usually. Yeah, it doesn't often. There are some cases in which it does. But in most common cases, it doesn't make any money. But you do have to invest time in marketing, in developer evangelism, product evangelism, feature development, road mapping. And those skills that I gained by being in open source translated really well to when I had to build my own product.
So it's one of those things where when it came time, you were like, I've got the idea, here's some grant money. And you know what? I've actually done all of this before.
Yeah, I would say if you're technical or not technical, and you're just looking for a way to exercise your leadership skills, your teamwork skills, maybe your management skills up to a certain point, getting it into open source is a really good way to do that. I know in the tech industry, we often talk about contributing to open source as a way to improve your technical skill set, whether you're a technical programmer or technical documentation writer or designer. I also think it's just a really great way to improve your interpersonal skills and your leadership skills and your product and project management skills. So yeah, that was one of my biggest influencers was open source.
This has been a series of just absolutely fantastic advice. I don't want to take up too much of your time. If there's a listener out there right now who's got an idea, it's a fantastic idea, they love their idea, but they're not quite sure they're ready to jump, what would you say to them to try and encourage them?
I'm a very practical person. So there's a couple of things that I would recommend doing if you're thinking of jumping into an idea. The first is kind of gauge your investment in it. Are you going to kind of quit your job and work on this? Are you going to work part-time and work on this? Are you going to work a full-time job and work on this? Kind of gauge what it is you're comfortable with. To provide some background, I started working on Zarf in mid-June. And while I was working on Zarf, I also had a full-time software engineering internship at a tech company. So I would go work 8 hours a day, and then I would come home and I'd work another 6 on Zarf.
How do you do that? That's incredible.
That was a personal choice I made because I kind of do support myself, so I needed a job. But I also wanted to push Zarf forward. And that was very hard. And it's not like I worked 6 hours every day. Sometimes I'd come home and not work on Zarf. But that was kind of the level of commitment that I was comfortable with. So before you start, kind of gauge what level of commitment am I comfortable with? Kind of figure out your finances. Am I going to be able to pay rent while I'm working on this? Do I have money saved aside? Can I sustain myself from a financial perspective as I'm working on the startup that I want to build? I'll caveat this by saying this is advice that is aimed at solo technical founders who are bootstrapped. So yeah, figure out kind of what level of commitment you're going to have to the product, figure out how you're going to sustain yourself financially as you're building it, because it's not going to make money off the bat. And then the next thing I would say is charge early and often. And when I say charge, I mean for the product itself. So Zarf is currently in beta. To participate in the beta, users have to pay $12. It's a one-time fee, but it's designed to kind of have them put some skin in the game and also as a way to earn money. Most betas are free, especially in the tech industry, but I decided to charge for mine. There is nothing wrong with asking money from your customers. Don't give away anything for free if you think you can make money off of it. Whether it's a blog post, whether it's a podcast, anything, you would be amazed how many things you can sell to people with the right marketing and branding. It's amazing.
This has been fantastic advice. It's been so wonderful to hear your story. Thank you very much for joining us.
No problem. Thank you for having me.